speaking today, we have Belinda Baker from Women's Safety Services and Heather Oxenham from Spirit of Women. A little bit of a bio on both of these wonderful people. So Belinda has been working in the DV, the domestic violence sector, for about 12 years and 2 years in Western Australia. She's worked in most of the DV accommodation services across metropolitan Adelaide and has worked with Women's Safety Services South Australia for just over 5 years. She's been seconded to work as program lead for the EASE pilot program, which stands for Earlier Access to Supports and Engagement, for 15 months. And previous to this role, she was the program manager of the Western Adelaide Domestic Violence Service. Heather Oxenham is the daughter of Helen Oxenham, who without Helen and women like her in the 1970s, there wouldn't be the roles that Belinda, for instance, plays today. So Heather, Helen's mum, in the 70s established the first drop-in centre for women seeking refuge in Adelaide at Christies Beach. The Christies Beach community rallied, donated blankets and sheets and baking lamingtons and cakes to raise money. In 1977, the first women's shelter in the suburb of Christies Beach was finally opened thanks to Helen, who in 2020 was bestowed an Order of Australia medal for her lifelong work supporting women in need. Helen established the organisation Spirit of Women, which has as their mission to commission the place of courage, public artworks and community spaces that pay tribute to those who have suffered from domestic and family violence, while acknowledging its impact on our communities. So with that, I'd like to welcome Belinda, who's going to speak first for 10 minutes, and she'll be inviting one of her colleagues to speak as well, who she'll introduce, and then Helen will come up and speak. So welcome everybody, Belinda Baker.
Well, thank you very much for having us here today. So I'm Belinda, program lead of EASE, which is Earlier Access to Support and Engagement, which is a pilot program with Women's Safety Services SA. And this is Monica, who is acting program manager of Western Adelaide Domestic Violence Service Accommodation Program. So we'd like to start off with an acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge that we are on the First Nations land and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. Women's Safety Services SA acknowledges and respects that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the First Nations people of this country and recognises Aboriginal people as traditional owners and occupants of South Australian land and waters. We acknowledge that First Nations people have never ceded sovereignty and remain strong in their enduring connection to land and water. So today what we'd like to do is actually talk a bit about Women's Safety Services and the supports that we provide. We're quite a large organisation in South Australia, so just want to talk a little bit about that. But firstly, just want to thank you for inviting us to speak today at this important event. And what a beautiful and meaningful program to be a part of. So really very exciting. We'd like also to take this opportunity to thank Rotary members Angela Ellis and Jeff Clues and all the other volunteers who came out to Western Adelaide Domestic Violence Service to support and upgrade the garden, work on the donation shed, and also recently provided a Coles voucher to purchase items for women and children. So just a little bit about Women's Safety Services SA. So we're a non-government organisation and the leading provider of specialist domestic and family violence services in South Australia. WSSSA aims to provide accessible services where clients are supported to move throughout the programs that best meet their needs. All programs have a safety-first approach, which puts the safety and empowerment of women and children central to service delivery and advocacy. Our core values are safety, diversity and equity, respect, responsiveness, flexibility and innovation, knowledge and accountability and community responsibility. We are also part of the Domestic and Family Violence Alliance in South Australia.
Part of WSSSA is the telephone-based support, which is the Domestic Violence Crisis Line, otherwise known as DVCL. 24/7 statewide telephone service providing access to the specialist domestic and family violence and homelessness services sector through an intake and referral process. Services include assessment and referrals, risk assessment and safety management, placement into safe accommodation, domestic family violence counselling, accompanying children's support, brokerage of alternative services, and assessments for Safe at Home program and the Personal Protection app. Additionally, we have thank you. We also have site-based services and accommodation. Sorry. So this includes a Western Adelaide Domestic Violence Service, which case management support includes providing a service to women and children in the form of risk and safety reviews, safety planning, brokerage and external referrals to other support agencies, motel and housing advocacy. So there are 4 mainstream accommodation programs: Eastern Adelaide Domestic Violence Services, Western, Southern and Northern Adelaide Domestic Violence Services. The referral pathways from DVCL include emergency accommodation, on-site accommodation, transitional housing properties, and supportive housing properties. Specifically, at Western Adelaide Domestic Violence Services, we have 7 crisis units, 25 transitional housing properties, and 17 supportive housing properties. These are just some photos of what our on-site accommodation looks like, and most of our accommodated sites are very similar. Crisis units are either 2 or 3 bedroom, and we also have disability and pet-friendly units. Another aspect of WSSSA is the culturally specific support, which includes Migrant Women's Support Program, which is statewide. Migrant Women's Support Program work with women of diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds who are in unsafe relationships. We also have a First Nations domestic and family violence site-based accommodation and support, which is accessed via the Domestic Violence Crisis Line.
And as part of Women's Safety Services SA, we have quite a lot of integrated programs. So there are quite extensive programs that sit under the umbrella of Women's Safety Services SA. So we have the Women's Safety Contact Program. We have SARTI, which is Safety, Accountability, Responsibility through Integration. We have the Multi-Agency Protection Service, Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme, Safe and Well Kids, Safe at Home, and Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme. We also have what's called the Crisis Accommodation Program. Now that program is actually based in south and north of Adelaide. So that is a domestic violence crisis accommodation pilot which provides short-term emergency accommodation up to 30 days to motel accommodation for women and their children experiencing domestic violence. So the one in the south is actually a house. So that a family can actually go into that one. In the north, they've got 8 units. And they're quite small though, so usually it's generally for single women or women that have a small child with them. There's intensive case management support provided for each client accommodated in this program, and the program has access to 2 properties in Southern Adelaide and 8, as I said, in North Adelaide. So Women's Safety Services SA also has training and education attached. So we actually go out we have a facilitator that goes out and offers training to workforce. So providing specialist practice and skill-based training around recognising and responding to domestic and family violence to a range of clients, including government, departments, NGOs in related sectors and private enterprises. So what we have now actually is, which has just started probably in the last 5 months, is we've received some funding which actually came out of the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. So out of that created a national partnership. And we have 2 pilot programs which are part of that partnership, and that's Connection, Strength and Recovery. So this pilot recovery model of intervention aims to build victims, survivors' resilience and wellbeing, individualised supports and access to recovery services. This provides a protective factor against potential future experiences of domestic and family violence, where increased connection, resilience, support networks and professional resources may increase women's safety. A lot of their work will be based around group work. So there'll be women transitioning out of longer term housing. Then we have the program which I am the program lead for, and that is the earlier access to support and engagement. This is an early intervention support that is flexible and responsible to the needs of victims and survivors. Our hope is with this program that we can interrupt the pattern of coercive control and abuse, that we are hoping to keep women and children in a safe, what they identify to be a safe home of their choosing, and try to avoid it escalating to crisis and them having to access emergency accommodation. So that's our hope for this program. It runs until September next year. We hope to be able to provide an evidence alongside with ANROS, who we're working with to gather the evidence, to show that the program is sustainable to get further funding and hopefully expand out to north and south region of Adelaide, because at the moment we're only based in the east and the west for this particular programs. We have our partners, who is Nungamimina, Centre Care Limestone Coast, Australian Refugee Association, and as I said, we're only based in the east and the west. We just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the statistics that ANROS did with the survey. So compared to men, women are at greater risk of physical and sexual violence by a partner.
Since the age of 15, approximately 1 in 4 women, compared to 1 in 13 men, has experienced at least one incident of violence by an intimate partner.
Women accounted for 3/4 of the people who experienced intimate partner violence since the age of 15, compared to men who accounted for 1/4 of those people.
Approximately 1 in 5 women, compared to 1 in 20 men, has experienced sexual violence.
And on average, 1 woman a week in Australia is killed by an intimate partner. So these statistics are frightening, and it's at this stage, we don't see that it's actually improving. So what we are really grateful for is organisations like yourself, who take, and we want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Rotary and the work that you're doing in the domestic and family violence space, including the Rotary Says No to Violence March in November, which myself and Monica are actually hoping to attend. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heather, Belinda and Monica. I'd now like to invite Heather up to speak about Spirit of Women, and Michael is just going to start off by showing us a video. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a great honour to be here because I'm in awe of the Rotary organisations, because we've received a lot of help over the years. In fact, Rotary down in the south were instrumental in helping my mother with the first women's shelter down there, when of course you wouldn't even mention the word family and domestic violence. And they really helped with the furniture and getting blankets and furnishing that first house that they got. And since I've been involved with this project, helping my mother, we've had quite a few Rotary members help us along the way. And I have to say to you, I'm in awe of your organisation, and I think the way that you rally together for community on a grassroots level is really impressive. So I'm very happy to be here today. We'll just start off with a video.
In my day, it was a secret. Nobody talked about it. We screamed in our house, you mean 4 children screaming in terror. The neighbors must have heard. They must have heard, but nobody talked about it.
My dad had health issues. I had to move with Nana.
When we were threatened to be killed, I guess, being threatened in your own home is one thing, but I guess being threatened by your own blood and flesh, that's something else. I think that was the root shock.
It struck home with me because my mum had always said to me that Dad would very often beat her up late at night and kick her outside. She very often would sleep on the wood heap. She would take the tin of kerosene with her because she just thought, that's it, I'm just going to end it. Can't take this anymore. When I was 4, I still remember my dad staying there with a rifle, going to shoot my mum, and my brother and sister standing next to me.
We went into hiding for about a year or so, and unfortunately after that year, my dad managed to find my mum. He tracked her down and he killed her in front of hundreds of witnesses. The fondest memories of my mum are in that year we were out of family home. For 20 years, I knew this person as my mum, who was someone who was in constant fear for her own life and her children's lives. But she changed. She was like a caterpillar. It's into a butterfly. And I guess she flew away. But what I learned from her in that year has now given me and given my sisters the energy and I guess the clear direction that we need to follow.
I want somewhere to be able to go for other women and for the children, and for to stop it going from generation to generation.
But I think it's really important for our community to recognise troubles, hardships, struggles.
I was lucky to be alive, but what about the other kids? Will they survive? That's why it's my job, and all of you people out there, to stop this.
It needs to stop. We need to say not one.
I hope to see one day we can all gather, men, women and children together around that memorial and have a celebration of what we've achieved.
So that's an introduction to my mum. She's 92 and normally she would be here, but she had a heart attack in March and I'm looking after her at home and I think she's determined to keep going until she sees the place of courage realised. So I have a lot on my plate and I'm hoping that after today that I might get some extra help. Thank you, Belinda and Monica, for those stats and the great work that Women's Safety Services do for women on that practical end, that crisis end, what I consider the emergency end. We're right at the other end. We're at the preventative intervention end. We want to educate and engage community in changing attitudes. 760 million women have died through family and domestic violence in the world. And the conversation for me gets lost in blame. Who's to blame? Is it the woman's fault? Is it the man's fault? Whose fault is it? And in a way, we get stuck there and we don't go to the next level with that conversation. And that is, it's not about who's at fault, but violence social cohesion, bullying is no way to conduct respectful relationships. So it really doesn't matter about what caused it, but it's really about the attitudes that all of us have. And I have found that sometimes I have had it as well. When, a close friend, a male friend, has hit his wife, who I'm absolutely very fond of and love, and he'll say to me, I felt provoked. I was angry. I didn't realize I did it. And you'd say, well, I know that we're not always perfect, but we can't resolve things with violence. So I'd like to just spend a few minutes and ask everybody to tell me, what do they think family and domestic violence is? What about the young women in this table? What do you think it is? There's no wrong answer. It's just, what do you think? Oh, here, thank you. It's unacceptable. So nice to hear a man say that. Thank you. What do you think it is? You're our younger generation. Do you realise that 1 in 3 women will be physically assaulted or sexually assaulted before you reach the age of 30? Does right.
Thank you. It doesn't feel real in a sense because it seems like something that's not an issue, but at the same time it is. For younger people, having the language to be able to ask people and to have these kinds of conversations in a way that is safe and age appropriate is really important. That we work towards that.
Thank you. So that's our job. That's Spirit of Women's job. We set up public artworks, local council areas. We then connect the local community organisations to those artworks. We go into the schools. We start to talk about family and domestic violence, and we ask the schools to put on art exhibitions so that it comes out into the open. It's a symbolic gesture of bringing something that was placed in the home into the public arena so that community take more responsibility for the issue, and we stop waiting for government policy initiatives to change community attitudes. We can do that. We believe that we can do that. And one of the most frightening things for me is that when we go into the schools, and my mother speaks, so she's 92, her first experience of being in hospital was when she was 5, when she was thrown up against the gas cooker by her father. And every time we go into hospital, she reconnects to those experiences as a child. And we go into these schools and we talk to young people about it. And the teachers are telling us that one girl a day comes forward talking about self-harming or wanting to commit suicide because of family and domestic violence. When we first started, the schools didn't want to talk to us about it. They said this issue is too hard. We don't have the resources. We don't have wellbeing teachers. We don't know how to, how do we talk to the teachers about disclosure if someone discloses that they have family and domestic violence? We don't have the skill sets or the resources to deal with this. But we kept knocking on the door. And now down in the Christies Beach High School, every 16 days of activism, the headmaster puts on a free barbecue in that school. He has male teachers and male men come up and talk to the students about it. All the services come in and we have little tents, and the students come round and they come and talk to us. And recently, when I was at our Seaford site, so we have our first ripple was in Rotary Park and Christies Beach, and it was because of the Rotary organisation that we were able to put that ripple into that area. The council at that time was not supportive of it. They said this is a family environment. We don't want to have something like that acknowledges family and domestic violence in our park. But Rotary supported us, and they wrote to the council and talked to the council and said that we think this is a very important thing to bring up into the local community. Our next one was at Seaford, through the city of Onkaparinga. We've got one at Charles Sturt. We've just put one in Gawler. We've got one coming up in Murray Bridge. We've also got one coming up in Port Adelaide and Enfield. We're talking to the Enfield Council. And when I was at the Seaford Ripple a couple months ago for the Seaford Open Day, there was a young 14-year-old boy there. And I said to him, he was sitting at our artwork. I said to him, "What do you think this is?" And he said, "I think it's interesting," and kept looking at the ground and didn't want to engage in conversation. I was like, do I ask more? Do I let it go? And I just said to him, "Why do you think it's interesting?" And he said to me, "I didn't know it wasn't normal." And so for us, that's our work. It's non-confrontative. It's non-blaming. It's about people finding out where they are on that journey. It's, people, so it's for people to go to mourn. It's for people to go through when they really relive trauma. And it's also Life Without Barriers bring their clients there and talk to their clients about it, because they say 95% of their clients come from family and domestic violence. Salvation Army say the men's shelters are full of men from family and domestic violence. And the biggest killer of women is family and domestic violence, and the biggest killer of men is suicide. And it makes you wonder why that is, and the role models that young men feel that they can't fit into and don't belong in that world. So the one that we're looking for at the moment is in Benithan Park. We've been 6 years campaigning the Adelaide City Council. It started off with a tree, then a rock. Now we have a sculpture, and we have all the local services support us, like White Ribbon, Women's Safety Services, and they will all go to that place so that your march that you've got organised that's going to Women's Pioneer Gardens would actually then go to Benithan Park. We have 200,000, but we need to raise another 450. Please look us up online. Please like us on Facebook. Please spread the word and share the work that we're doing. That'd be much appreciated. Thank you very much for having us.